went to college at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, and that makes me incredibly excited to introduce this morning U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse is a major advocate for combating climate change denial. He's the co-founder and co-chair of both the Bicameral Task Force on Climate Change and the bipartisan Senate Ocean Caucus. He serves on the Environment and Public Works Committee, where he is the chair of the Subcommittee on Oversight. Climate change is such an important issue to Senator Whitehouse that he has given over 65 weekly addresses on the Senate floor, urging his fellow legislators that it's time to wake up on this issue. And since that is one of the issues that we will be lobbying on later today, it's especially exciting to have Senator Whitehouse here with us today. And I just want to quote one of his most recent speeches, and this quote's a little long, but I just couldn't cut it down because it's just so brilliant. The statement that God won't allow us to ruin our planet sweeps aside ethics, responsibilities, consequences, duties, even awareness. It comforts us with the anodyne assumption that no matter what we do, some undefined presence will, through some undefined measure, make things right, clean up our mess. That is seeking magical deliverance from our troubles, not divine guidance through our troubles. It is our great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, the United States Senator from Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse.
Well, I was going to be happy to be here anyway, but I'm particularly happy to be here when I'm introduced by a Brown University graduate. We're very proud of Brown University in Rhode Island, and Brown has just hit its 250th anniversary, and they're celebrating that this year. So it's a great, great institution, and thank you all for having me here this morning. I guess I'm going to make a few remarks and then maybe take a couple of questions. And leave you with the next speaker. I'm honored to follow Rush Holt. He is one of a very few members of Congress who can actually have their supporters support a bumper sticker that says, "My congressman is a rocket scientist." And he has been a terrific colleague on a great number of issues. So thank you for inviting me here this morning. Thank you for your work to promote the religious freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, freedoms of both belief and non-belief alike. These are freedoms we hold very dearly in Rhode Island, where freedom of religion was the great legacy of our founder, Roger Williams, who was banished from Massachusetts for what they called his whimsies about religious tolerance. Roger Williams established a new colony, Providence, on the northwestern shores of Narragansett Bay as a, to use his words, shelter for persons distressed for conscience. For that reason, his statue still stands today in the United States Capitol. Rhode Island's earliest settlements, all of them, Providence, Portsmouth, Newport, and Warwick, all were founded by people seeking religious freedom. In 1663, the royal charter granted by King Charles II, establishing the colony of Rhode Island and Providence plantations, codified those founders' ideals. Quote, "To hold forth a lively experiment," it declared, "that a most flourishing civil state may stand and best be maintained," think about that, "best be maintained with a full liberty in religious discernments." That King Charles Charter has been called America's Magna Carta because it is the first formal document in all history that grants a formal separation of church and state, along with extraordinary freedoms of speech within a political entity as a part of its charter. It was briefly suspended in the 1680s, but reinstated under King William III, who had been Prince of Orange in the Netherlands. Netherlands was then known for both its religious diversity and its economic prosperity. And that linkage was apparent in Rhode Island as well. Much as the Dutch economy benefited from its relative tolerance, Rhode Island's unique sense of liberty allowed traders from Quaker trading networks, Baptist trading networks, Jewish trading networks, all to connect with each other in Newport, Rhode Island. You can imagine what trading was like in an era when there was not only no email, no fax, no telephone, no banks that operated on both sides of the Atlantic. The entire foundation for trading networks was one of trust. And trust tended to follow family, religious, and tribal lines. So when you stack those up and people trusted each other across those different networks, it created an explosion of commerce and made Newport immensely wealthy. As historian Lynn Wythe has noted, both the religious tolerance and economic sagacity of Newport's founders paid off in later years. Men of various religions were attracted there, drawn by both its religious and economic climate. And these men were largely responsible for developing Newport's economy at several key periods in its history. These principles of tolerance are the foundation on which our state and afterwards our nation were built. This lively experiment in Rhode Island blazed the path for America's freedom of religion. Indeed, during the earliest days of our republic, before the ratification even of the Bill of Rights, the Jewish congregation at Newport's Touro Synagogue sought assurance from President George Washington, then campaigning through Rhode Island, that religious freedom would be guaranteed to Jews throughout the country. Washington's response left no doubt. The request came in a form from the warden of the congregation, Moses Satius, and the letter back from President Washington to Warden Satius says this: "The government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens." Washington was a politician and recognized a good phrase when he saw one, and that phrase, "to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance," was a phrase that Warden Satius had actually written in his letter to Washington. And he quickly appropriated and made that letter his own. The Founding Fathers enshrined religious freedom in the First Amendment of our Bill of Rights, and they appealed to reason as the foundation of authority in America. And I would contend that a great measure of America's success, both economic and political, has come from the foundation that we have set on the base of reason. This nation, founded in the wake of the Enlightenment, set a close relationship between science and freedom. Thomas Jefferson described freedom as the firstborn daughter of science. I have a little personal insight, by the way, into this linkage, because my wife is a scientist and studies marine science, and so we have a science policy linkage right in my family. Innovation is in our American DNA, and it is at the heart of our greatness. From Rhode Island, from Pawtucket, Rhode Island's Slater Mill, where Rhode Island gave birth to the Industrial Revolution, to the generation of American progress sparked by the shock of Sputnik, we have seen what can happen when we believe in and trust in and invest in the power of science. But sadly, we have also seen what can happen when we deny the truths of science, whether for profit or to suit political ideology. corporate and political elites have over and over conspired to unmoor our democracy from fact. For decades, tobacco, pharmaceutical, lead paint, chemical, and oil and coal companies have constructed entire fake science infrastructure to distort facts and cover their dangerous activities under a veneer of bought and paid for scientific costume. Today, these forces push to derail responsible action on climate change. There isn't just lying going on about climate change. There is a whole carefully built apparatus of lies, featuring a stable of payroll scientists that polluters can trot out as needed. Industry-funded scientists and sympathetic politicians still try to claim that the jury is out on whether carbon pollution is causing the unprecedented changes in our atmosphere and oceans that we have seen. Indeed, one of my Republican colleagues called climate science the greatest hoax ever perpetrated upon the American people. Well, the jury is not still out. The jury is back. It has rendered its verdict, and the verdict is undeniably in. The climate crisis is real. And the polluters' deliberate sabotage of informed governance is a pollution of our democracy every bit as grave as their carbon pollution of our atmosphere and oceans. Carl Sagan made the case for what can happen if we continue down this road. Here's what he said. We've arranged a global civilization in which most crucial elements profoundly depend upon science and technology. We have also arranged things so that almost no one understands science and technology. This is a prescription for disaster. We might get away with it for a while, but sooner or later, this combustible mixture of ignorance and power is going to blow up in our faces. I seek to preserve a country in which policy making is guided by reason, in which we respect science, in which the democratic process relies on fact. And there is no antithesis here between science and religion. If God did indeed create this earth, did he also not create its natural rules, the laws of science? And is not humankind's discovery of these rules and our advancement by understanding them and mastering them not part of his plan for us? There is no antithesis. I submit to you that the supposed conflict in this area between science and religion has a lot less to do with religion than it has to do with politics, with the age-old human pursuit of wealth and power, and the age-old motive of men to subvert the engines of governance to the service of private greed and selfish ends. But we are better than that. And I assure you, we will defeat those dark forces. Thank you very much. Couple of questions before yeah, sure. Sir.
Some minorities are seen as important constituencies and others are disdained, such as fat Americans. What can atheists do to become one of the respected and important constituencies?
I think every constituency does well when it organizes and does well when it refuses to yield to stigmatization. I think confidence and pride are catching, and organization in politics is always effective.
Senator.
Yes, sir.
Senator. Hi. So,
Robin. She grabbed the mic, so she's way ahead of you guys. You can take her hands up.
I have a question about evolution. The last poll taken of the American populace said that 46% agreed with this statement that human beings arrived on this earth fully formed within the last 10,000 years. Can you talk about the problem of scientific illiteracy in this country and what can be done about it?
It is a true problem when there are statistics like that out there. And it's a problem in and of itself of illiteracy, but it opens the door to a secondary problem, which is manipulation by clever forces that take advantage of that illiteracy to try to convince people of things that simply aren't true. Remember Pinocchio being led astray by the fox and the cat in the old Pinocchio movie. Come with me to Pleasure Island, I think was the way that worked. If you know your science and if you understand what's going on, then it's a lot harder to be sold a pack of lies by people who don't mean you well. And so it's a double harm for our society. In the first instance, somebody who is scientifically literate is not likely to contribute in a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics driven economy. And second, as a population, it makes us vulnerable to propagandizing by mischievous forces.
Thank you. Senator, later today we will be visiting with members of Congress and their staff to promote our ideas. Do you have any specific suggestions about how we can be most effective in doing that?
Be from their home state or district. Despite all of the scorn heaped on Washington for being a town that is enthralled to lobbyists and special interests, there is also a keen and particular attention that is paid to constituents, and take full advantage of that. Eric Cantor made that discovery in a very
Earlier you said that the problem with the proper handling of scientific thought in politics is it's not a problem with religion, it's a problem with politics itself. I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit on why you disagree then with the following proposition. A lot of us believe that those who profess religious belief are already committing themselves to an irrational approach to reality. So that leads to, in the thinking of a lot of us, that helps lead to a situation where you deny facts. Now, if you're propounding, if I understand you correctly, that religious belief does not predispose one to an irrational approach to reality, well, why do you believe that religious belief, it does not induce or tend towards an irrational view of reality where all issues are concerned? Thank you.
I think that most religions have doctrine that is broad enough to encompass the facts of Earth's operation as we know them. And that one can be a very knowledgeable, experienced, and informed scientist, a biologist, a physicist, a chemist, and still have a very true and earnest and informed religious view. Where I have a problem is where it appears that those religious views are driving people not to embrace the facts of Earth's life and of science as we know them, but to deny them. And my argument is that where that happens, you would likely be successful if you scratched a bit at looking for a political motive behind it. And that the conflict, such as it is between religion and science, is less a product of religion than it is a product of scientific illiteracy and interests taking advantage for political purposes to try to create that wedge. I don't think there's anything inherent, for instance, in Judaism or Christianity that would cause you to deny that the species has been around for thousands of years, that the planet is millions of years old, that when you add carbon into the atmosphere it creates a warming effect, that carbon dioxide floated over the ocean will be absorbed and acidify the ocean, that the law of thermal expansion means you warm the sea and it rises and sea level rises as a result. None of those propositions is, in my view, in conflict at all with the principles of Christianity and Judaism as I know them. I'm not as expert in other religions, I'm not really expert in those, but I mean, I have a more passing familiarity from life in these United States. But I just think that very often in life it's important to look behind the curtain to find who the real mischief maker is. And I suspect in a lot of this stuff, the real mischief maker is special interests trying to have things turn out their way and take advantage of religion as a vehicle to get their way and to seize power and money.
Senator?
One last. Woody.
I'd like to look behind the curtain. Which came first, your relationship with Sandra or your relationship with the environment and protecting the oceans?
That's a good question. Probably, well, I grew up having had a lot of interesting opportunities. My dad was a Foreign Service officer. So we grew up in a lot of strange places. They happened to be mostly coastal places. And so I've had the good fortune from a very young age to have been around the sea and swum and dove and learned to scuba dive and sail and all that kind of stuff. And before I knew Sandra, I had an emotional appreciation for the sea in particular, and I had some experiences on it that I consider to be just extraordinarily moving. Sandra kind of filled in the good sense and the rules and how it works, and took it from being kind of an emotional appreciation to getting down into the nuts and bolts of it a bit more. She was even able to convince me to go to the bottom of Narragansett Bay with her when she was doing her winter flounder studies. And when you say winter flounder, yup, that's when we went down. And it's true love when you're willing to have your wetsuit filled with 34-degree seawater. it only hurts for a while. Women are tougher than men, though. Women are tougher than men. She just totally wants, there's no doubt about it. I was the one who was doing all of the whining. And when I had my gloves on, she said, take off your gloves. I said, what do you mean take off my gloves? She said, my hands will stay at least remotely warm. She said, look, you need to have the dexterity down there to work the equipment that I'm going to be having you work, so you can't wear gloves. Said, my hands will be cold. She said, don't worry, after a while they go numb. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.